Hello everybody, my name is GraduateBar97 and I would like to start this video off by apologizing for the lack of a video this week. Um, I initially tried to get this video out on Monday so I could do yesterday and Tuesday as the Road to 100 series like I initially promised, but this video required a lot more work than I initially anticipated. The first rounds of recordings, the audio is completely unusable, and I'm not yet talented enough with my editing software to really, solve those audio issues. I'm still learning, I'm still in the process of figuring this out. So I hope this video will act as an olive branch, an apology of sorts for the lack of content this week. Um, Hopefully I'll have another one of these up Monday, but we will see. Without further ado, I would like to introduce to you a new series for this channel called the Weekly News Roundup. This series is a series that I've started with the express purpose of helping us cut through the noise of the Trump presidency and through the just sheer chaotic nature of everything he's doing. Um, I will select between 10 to 15 or 20 of the best stories from around the world and in the United States for the week, and that is what we will be covering. Um, I need to be clear, this is an aggregation of news. I'm not doing independent journalism on my own. And so every single source that I cite, every single thing that I talk about in these videos, I would like you all to take with a grain of salt because I mean it's just, news and legacy media always has an angle. And even though I will be providing my own spin on things, I'm not immune to propaganda either. So just like please be aware, uh be on the lookout for anything I say, anything I do that seems propaganda-ish. And if you read these stories that I am citing, please, please, please make sure you are using a very critical and analytical eye. Um, all right. Before we get too much further, I need to make it clear that all the opinions expressed in this video are mine and mine alone, not those of any of my other employers, uh, and I'm not representative of the stance for either of my other employers. Again, the opinions and analysis expressed in this video are mine and mine alone. They are not representative of the other employers that I work for, who have employed me, and they do not represent the official stance of these employers. Alrighty. Today we have roughly 11 to 12 stories to cover. Um, I will give you the names and then you can scrub through the video. There will also be like chapter markers down in the description for where everything is at. Um, but today we will be covering Trump's tariffs, Trump's deportations, the California wildfires, Trump's executive orders, and then specifically the birthright citizenship executive order, bird flu, Greenland. Then we will hop over to the international side of things and talk about DeepSeek, the Gaza ceasefire, Elon Musk's German speech. Uh, Brazil is going to be addressing intellectual property rights for generative AI and protests around the world for against alt-right fascism. All right, I hope you all enjoy this video, and I hope to see you all Monday with another one of these. Thank you. Alrighty, everybody. Before you get into the first story, which are Trump's planned tariffs um, around the world and how this is going to impact us and what we can do about it, I want to make it clear that the Trump administration, just like any fascist government, is going to use tactics not too dissimilar to shock and awe. If you're like a major um, war nerd and you know what blitzkriegs are, that's basically what they're doing here with all the shit they're throwing out at us. Um, for those who don't know, blitzkriegs are a whereas it was a war tactic developed by I want to say it was Nazi Germany, where you overrun your opponents so quickly and you hit them with such a hard attack so fast right at the start that they don't have the resources to resist anymore. I think that that's a very apt description for the mental warfare that the Trump administration and the people in power are waging against us right now. Um, they are attempting to throw so much out there, do so many outrageous actions that we are out of energy to fight when the outrageous actions become too outrageous and like we need to step up. Um, they're attempting to just drain us of our resources now so we can't fight later. The best way to defend against this is to give yourself the time to recuperate and recover. Stay in touch with the news. I'm not saying like distance yourself and live under a rock. Keep up with what's going on in the world. But if you get to a point where you're like, I can't do this anymore, it's too much for me to handle, don't feel bad about taking a step back and going for a walk or hugging a loved one or playing video games or just doing anything else. At the end of the day, at the end of the day, you the best way we can resist any sort of fascistic government and make sure we have the resources to speak up when they are, you know, being fascists in the future is to make sure that we don't allow ourselves to drown now. So if this video gets too much, pause it, close the tab, do anything, then physically stand up and do not doom scroll. Play a game, read a book, go drink some tea, cook, do anything, right? Um, just make sure you're giving yourself the time to mentally recover, is what I'm saying. Because that is how we will fight against any and everything the Trump administration tries to throw our way. Alrighty, let's hop into the first story, which will hopefully be pretty short. I'm hoping to keep each segment at or below 10 minutes. Uh, and so there's limited time for analysis, but I also don't want to be uploading a 7-hour video essay every single week. That sounds like too much work. All right, Trump's tariffs. Donald Trump, during his campaign trail and once he got into the White House, made promises to impose tariffs around the world to help put America first. It's part of his America First policy. Um, these tariffs, for those who don't know, a tariff is an economic tool, and it is effectively an import tax on any and all goods entering the country. Um, and so, for example, if we were to tariff like plastic number two, uh, that means that any plastic number two that enters the United States has to be it has to be taxed. We have to be dealing with that tax and we have to be paying that tax. The companies, technically it's a tax on the corporations that are importing this. So if Mattel imports plastic number two from China, they are paying an import tax on that. So the Mattel pays more to get their plastics. Mattel will then turn around and increase the price of those plastics and those goods so that they don't have to pay the tax, right? It is a the goal of a tariff is to try to either disincentivize people from importing or it is to incentivize us to increase at-home economic production. And it can also be used as a trade war, which we'll get into a bit here in the next story. Um, but at the end of the day, these are taxes paid by the consumers, and they can work, right? Because if the consumers get too much, if the price of goods becomes too much for consumers, they're going to stop buying those goods, and so that will theoretically incentivize the companies to start producing where they don't have to pay the tariffs. Um, so they can work, but they are a targeted strategy because of how effective they are at ruining the economy. So, like, if we wanted to increase steel production, it would make sense to tariff only the top importer or the top exporter of steel and only in the area of steel. Um, a flat tariff on every single good entering or exiting the country is too much. And that's what Trump has promised. That's what Trump promised, is that there's a flat good or a flat tariff on everything, a universal tariff on all goods imported by America. Um, Donald Trump is promising a minimum of a 20% tariff on everything that we import, which is obscene. That's a raise in 20% on all of our, uh, you know, goods. And that's according to an article written for PBS News by Paul Wiseman and the Associated Press on September 27th, 2024. Um, so during, like, the campaigning years. Uh, these tariffs are going to impact everything. It's also important to note Trump promised an additional 60% tariff on all goods imported from Canada. Or, sorry, not Canada, China. Canada's on my brain for the next episode. But yeah, for China, there is a flat 20% or a flat additional 60% tariff on top of the 20% tariff. So all Chinese goods going to be expensive. And that's not good because we import a lot from China. Anyways, let's get into what specifically is going to be more expensive. And this is coming from an article written by Louise Melgar and Rachel Lerman for the Washington Post. And this was published January 27th, 2025. So when this video was supposed to go up. Um, According to this article, basically everything is going to be tariffed, and so everything's getting more expensive. Specifically, they break down how much of how much things are going to go up by. And it says here that we import roughly $1.3 trillion from Mexico, China, and Canada. And so a flat 20% tariff on all of those, plus an additional 60% on China, is going to increase the price of all 1.3 trillion of those goods by at least 20%. And that's like the bare minimum. Um, we import the article is breaking down specifically cell phones, clothes, and household goods being the big things that we are going to be paying more on. We import nearly 80% of all of our like cookware. So that's like knives, that's KitchenAid, that's, toasters, microwaves, all of that. We import nearly 80% of that from China. So if y'all wanted like a good cast iron pan, might be a little late to get it. We'll see. But this also includes like toys, cell phones, our healthcare devices, television, all this stuff. So what this means is that if you need a new phone, it is going to be drastically more expensive now. If you, God forbid, if you need to go to the hospital, the price of your bill is going to skyrocket immensely because the importers are going to pass that price tag on to the hospitals for those healthcare devices. Those hospitals are going to price the cost of that increased cost onto the insurance company, and the insurance company is going to pass that increased cost on to you. As a result, you're going to be paying more for your healthcare. Um, Televisions are going to go up. I'm honestly, out of everything on this list, I'm least worried about televisions being more expensive, but just be aware. Um, it's not just the luxury goods that are going to go up. Things like vegetables, feed, bakery products, liquor, all of that fun stuff. We import healthy amount of all of that from Mexico and Canada specifically. And so those are going to be more expensive. Fresh fruits and vegetables are going to become harder for us to obtain. And if we do obtain them, they're going to be more expensive. As a result, uh, eating healthily and living a healthy lifestyle is going to become even harder than it already is. And then the final area this article pinpoints is vehicles and car parts, of which we import a lot from Mexico. So better hope your vehicles don't break down, because that spark plug you need, all of a sudden, it's not $20, it's $800. That's a exaggeration, but you get my point. So, what can we do to deal with all of these extra tariffs? The answer is, in my opinion, actually quite simple. Um, for all of the luxury goods, simply try to make everything you already own last as long as you can. Now is not the time to be replacing broken things. Now is the time to learn how to repair these. And if you genuinely can't fix like your cell phone or your computer, that's okay. Take a step back and like figure out how long you can go without it. And if you desperately need it, then it'll be okay. You'll need to sit down. You'll need to figure out some finance plans. You'll likely need to figure out how much you can realistically pay every year, but it's not going to be the end of the world. As for your cookware, that doesn't break easily. So theoretically, even if you have a shitty, cheap pan from Walmart, if you take good care of it, it should continue to cook just fine. Um, as for the food that it's going to be tariffed, I recommend that you start buying canned goods instead of fresh goods. Canned goods are imported. We still import those, so they're going to be more expensive, but they are continuously less expensive than the fresh stuff. So if you're, as a result, I recommend bulk buying your canned goods, bulk buying canned soups, beans, tomato paste, all of that, rather than buying it fresh, because that will still save you money in the long run. It may not taste as good, it may not be as good for you, but it is still ultimately a better option than spending your entire paycheck on fresh fruits and vegetables. Um, Canned goods have an expiration date of about 2 years, and that is an expiration for if the can is damaged. So if you have a can that is like in good condition, there's no dents or bumps in it that would like cause the metal to protrude into your food, that canned good is actually going to last you many, many multiple years. Um, so if you like bulk buy now, you'll get about 2 years into Trump's presidency before things become outrageously expensive, and you will likely be able to make them last even longer. So yeah, bulk buy your canned goods now. If you drink, I would recommend giving up drinking, um, if only because it is going to be an unnecessary drain on your wallet. There are better ways to cope with everything we're doing right now, and there are other ways to have fun. Um, so just like give up drinking, buy canned goods, and get really used to being food insecure, because there's not a lot we can do about like the sugar imports that we have. Those are going to be tariffs. Sugar's going up, flour's going up. Um, Make do with what you can. Recognize that you might not have all the luxuries you had before. All right, that's all for this story. Let's hop into the next one. All right, y'all. Let's hop into this next article or this next set of stories here, which is the deportation flights uh, that Trump has started doing and the international response to them. Um, so another big promise of the Trump campaign was that he would deport 10 million or 20 million or some unreasonable number of quote unquote illegal immigrants. Um, these immigrants are the people who either cross the border completely illegally, or they are the people who, are still waiting to get their green card because our immigration system is unreasonably slow, and like horrible to deal with. Um, or just it's pretty much anybody who's not a fully naturalized citizen. And even then, fully naturalized citizens, people with US citizenships are still getting deported. I'll get into that more here in just a second. But that's the people that's like the group that Trump is seeking to deport, are quote unquote illegal immigrants. Um, he started these uh, deportations through ICE raids pretty much immediately. Um, According to an article by the BBC News written January 26th, 2025, they managed to deport and arrest nearly 1,000 immigrants on that Sunday. On just that one day, they managed to round up 1,000 immigrants to be deported, which is a frankly obscene number of immigrants. These ICE raids are happening all across the country, and this is how they're doing it. They're sending ICE officers into schools, into workplaces, into hospitals. They're ripping children from, these schools. They're taking sick people from hospital beds, all to round them up to deport them. These are deplorable actions, genuinely some of the worst things that could be happening. And this is going to tie a lot more into some of next week's stories. So I want everybody to keep this in mind. But the fact that Trump is pushing so hard to round so many people up so quickly indicates to me pretty strongly that he is starting to set up for a genocide. I know that sounds like fear mongering, but if y'all are paying attention to the news, because mind you, this is old news, quote unquote, um, Trump has already signed an executive order to put 30,000 immigrants in Guantanamo Bay. Uh, there's no way that Guantanamo Bay has nearly enough resources, nearly enough, not enough space. There's no food, there's no water, there's not enough to take care of all these people. And that's kind of what a genocide is, just letting a bunch of people die. And that's what Trump is setting up for here. Um, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Before Trump signed this executive order, which happened, I believe, yesterday, so the 29th, um, Trump rounded up all these immigrants and started trying to send them back to Latin American countries. Specifically, Colombia is who we are going to be talking about because their response is some of the most interesting to me. Um, so Trump rounds up all of these illegal immigrants. He then has them handcuffed by the hands and the feet, not too dissimilar to what we would do to like a highly dangerous prisoner, and uh, just sticks them on a military plane and sends them on their way. Now, it's important to note that Colombia in the Biden administration had a system to deal with flight plans. They had a system, or not flight plans, sorry. They had a system to deal with deportations. Colombia would get like a 48-hour notice. They would get approval before the plane takes off, um, and all that, so that like everybody was ready to accept the new immigrants that are coming into the country. Um, and Trump did away with that. He just stuck a whole bunch of people onto a military plane and started flying. Now, initially, Colombia refused this for two reasons. They refused this plane for two reasons, and this is according to a Washington Post article that was updated January 27th, 2025. Um, Initially, Colombia decided to deny Trump's deportation flights because of the inhumane conditions that the deportees were being kept in. So, like, the being totally chained up despite being non-violent criminals, despite not having done anything to warrant that level of restraint, and because Trump violated the promise the US and Colombia had for how to deal with deportations. Now, Trump didn't like this at all, and so he slapped a 25% tariff uh, on all Colombian goods. Now, that's especially bad because the goods that we're talking about are like coffee. So, if you're a big coffee drinker, a lot of our coffee comes from Colombia, so that's going to be more expensive. Colombia, after hearing about this 25% tariff, slaps back with a 50% tariff on all imported American goods. And this is what I was talking about in the last story with tariffs being a tool of trade wars and economy wars, that they are used to punish and coerce other countries into doing what they want. Now, Colombia did eventually back down and accepted the deportation flights. And Trump is painting this as a win. He's saying, yes, we did this. Yes, we are the good guys. Yes, we won. Nobody is going to be able to stand up to the United States. Um, But I should be clear that Colombia did not back down because of the tariffs, right? They had the backing of the world. A lot of Latin American countries, many of the Latin American and Caribbean countries were in support of Colombia's decision to deny access to this deportation flight. Um, Colombia backed down because if they didn't, these immigrants would become more or less slaves because the United States would have to house them in our prison system. And under the 13th Amendment, slavery is not outlawed if you are a prisoner. Um, that's like the only way they were able to outlaw chattel slavery outright because the racist South was dead set on having slaves in some form. So the compromise was, well, if they're indentured service, if they're prisoners, then they can be indentured servants for the state. Um, and so Colombia ultimately backed down to prevent these people from entering the American prison system and becoming indentured servants for the state and suffering even worse, even more inhumane conditions. These are that's the, I think, correct decision on Colombia's part to accept these prisoners despite the inhumane conditions, accept these deportees, um, despite everything they were standing on, because at the end of the day, I think it is better to cede to a narcissist and save people from danger than it is to allow these innocent people to be effectively, forced into slavery. Um, so when you hear that when you hear Trump supporters say, "Oh well, Colombia backed down, so we're doing something right," or "Oh, they backed down because of the tariff," they didn't. Colombia was ready to go bar for bar with us on an economic war. They were going to go into a trade war with us. I don't know how that war would have played out, but it's important to note that Colombia did not um back down because they're scared of Trump. They back down because at the end of the day, Trump is going to be worse to those prisoners than the look of, than how Colombia would have ended up looking on the world stage. And I believe they would have rather taken a hit to their public perception um, and played nice to Trump than they wanted to, more than they wanted to allow these prisoners to be abused. Um, so yeah, Trump's deportation flights are occurring, the mass deportations are happening. Um, we'll talk a lot more about Guantanamo Bay and his plan next week. Um, just because that's going to be at least a 30-minute segment where I dissect exactly why I believe it's the start of a genocide. But just keep that in mind, right? Just don't stew on it, but just tuck it away in the back of your mind for a little bit. And if you want, you can do additional research outside of these videos. But that's all I got for this story. Trump is rounding up millions of quote unquote illegal immigrants and is either putting them in slavery, sending them to Guantanamo Bay, or trying to deport them to other countries, which they are forced to accept to save those deportees from slavery. Um, yeah, let's hop into the next story. All right, everybody. I'm going to make this next story quick, if only to save us all a little bit of time and me a little bit of editing work. But it's about the California wildfires. Um, so, as I'm sure you're aware, California has been suffering from some pretty extreme wildfires for a while now. They, these are some of the worst wildfires California has ever seen. Um, and they have destroyed upwards of, I believe, 37,000 acres of land. Um, and I'm getting that number, or I apologize, it's 38,000 acres, or 15,300 hectares of land. I'm getting that number from an article on Al Al Jazeera, ALJAZEERA. Um, that was published January 27th, 2025. Um, Point is, these wildfires are bad, and they're not over. This is not a good news story yet. Um, but it's destroyed a lot of land. Trump's response has been piss poor and, frankly put, disgusting. Um, he signed an executive order demanding that California stop trying to protect a fish and has blamed like the fish on why uh, we're seeing water mismanagement in California, which is wrong. Um, like California is not hoarding water to save fish. That's not what's happening. What's happening is that California is in the middle of a drought that's been going on for a long time now. And because of that drought, the conditions for fires, especially bad fires like this, are way it's perfect for bad fires. And the drought also means that they don't have the water to fight back. Uh, I'm not going to get into the complexities of California's water management system. If that's something y'all want to hear more about, let me know and I will start doing research on that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the wildfires are bad. They've destroyed homes, taken lives. It's really bad. Um, there are two parts to the story I want to talk about. The first is that California has gotten some rain, and the second is Trump's way of handling the wildfires. So, California has, to start with, let's talk about the rain. California finally got some rain about a week ago now, and has started to help to douse the wildfires, which is good. The weaker fires and the moisture will make it harder for them to continue. But the important thing is that they are not a it's not like raining over everywhere the fires are. It's just in some areas, and it's just dousing the fires. It's not putting the fires out. These are not yet torrential downpours that would like wet everything too much. Um, Anyways, the while the rain is helping put out the fires, which is good, it is now causing it's putting California at an increased risk for toxic runoff, mudslides, and debris. Um, and so as a reason, and so what this means is that like even if the fires have left an area and a city can begin the process of of rebuilding, they can't actually go in for a while until the toxic runoff is gone and until California is, or at least at the bare minimum, until the toxic runoff is gone. They can shore up the mud. They can make sure that it doesn't slide as easily, but they can't do a lot about that toxic runoff. This toxic runoff is primarily composed of a bunch of ash and soot and all the like nasty stuff that comes from a fire. Um, and with the rain, it is now pushing all of that downhill towards the ocean, conveniently where the cities are. Um, and so as a result, the California is still not in a safe spot. Their toxic runoff and the debris is still bad enough that they're going to need to do a lot of work to help A, protect the environment, and B, the people living there. Um, Mudslides are also a huge concern because, all the plants are dead, and so there's nothing to hold the ground together. That's one of the major benefits of like having roots in an area is that it will prevent the uh, mud from running off when it gets super wet because it's all like held together by the roots. Um, Without any of those roots, the muds can go. So we're likely to see even more devastation and destruction coming soon as the uh, as more rain comes and as the hills stop being able to support their own weight. Uh, okay, second part of the story is the Trump's reaction to this. There's a lot to Trump's reaction, and safe to say that all of it is the actions of a narcissist, and they're all brain dead stupid because that's what Trump is, just a moronic narcissist. Um, but Trump has initially Trump said he would think about offering aid to California if there were strings attached to that aid. Specifically, he wants those strings to be California implementing voter ID laws, which is bad because that means that it's harder for people to vote, which in turn means that it's harder for the Democrats to win. Um, and it's going to be easier for the Republicans to win going forward. Now, ultimately, I think that Trump is. I don't think implementing voter ID laws would cause California to swing red, but I think it would mean that the Democrats and progressives in the area have to do substantially more work every year, which we should be doing in general, but whatever. Um, so that's the first part of Trump's response. He's like, I'll help California only if they bend to me. Um, the second part of Trump's response is just so utterly stupid because Trump has decided that he wants the federal government to overwrite and circumvent California water laws in response to the wildfire. Now, I couldn't tell you in what way Trump wants to circumvent these laws. I'm getting this information from an article written for the NBC News by Rebecca Shad on January 27th. Sorry, Shabad on January 27th, 2025. Um, the circumvention of California's water system, if I'm understanding how state laws work, is not actually a thing the feds can do. Because California's water system is not assisted by federal money. It's not assisted by federal grants, to the best of my knowledge. Um, the federal government can offer money to the states and they can make that conditional. That's part of like what No Child Left Behind and ESSA, the ESSA Act were doing is that they made the funding provided to public schools conditional on test scores. Um, and so unless, the federal government is sending California money in order to help with their water response, the there's actually not a lot that Trump can do to circumvent these laws because he has no leverage. That's state law, and the federal governments absolutely cannot interfere with the states, according to the 10th Amendment. Um, Granted, fascists don't care about the law. They're going to do what they're going to do. But I'm just like, in a normal world, in a world where law and order aren't being circumvented by a narcissistic prick, uh, that's what would happen. Um, Trump couldn't do this. I, as a result, I don't know, because of the 10th Amendment, I don't know how Trump plans to circumvent the water law or what that would really look like, but I think this is all just talk and bluster to try and get us confused. So I'm not going to worry all that much about Trump's response to the California wildfires because we know it's going to be piss poor, it's going to be middling, it's going to do everything it can to not actually help anybody. Um, the the end result, ultimately, what I want us to take away from this story is that Trump is going to be using these kinds of disasters going forward to force states to bend to his will and to distract us from the other shit that he is doing. So pay mind to the natural disasters that we're seeing in the world. Pay mind to the harm our fellow Americans are going through. Do not pay mind to Trump's response to it. And when he talks about helping blue states only if they bend to him, just know that this is bluster to try and get more people to bend to his will because he's a narcissist and can't handle hearing the word no. Um, so help when you can and help how you can to the disaster victims, but don't anticipate much out of Trump and don't listen to him when he goes on and on and on about how a fish is the reason that Cali's wildfires are the way they are. Okay, final thing on the story, I've been seeing a lot of claims going around that billionaires are the reason Cali doesn't have the water, and that they're like only 2 billionaires are holding all of California's water wealth, and that's not true. California's water system is split between the private water system and water banks and the public water system, which has aquifers. Without getting too in depth about this, billionaires have a lot of stake and say in the water banks in California, which are effectively private aquifers that people who are in like the water bank can draw from. Um, California's water banks, to the best of my knowledge, do not comprise a majority of California's water. I believe a majority of that is public use and public water. Uh, and so when you're in California and you're hearing all the when you're hearing about the story and you're hearing about the billionaires, and if you ever go to California and you're in California, just know that like the reason they're struggling is because of the drought draining the public aquifers. It's not because 2 billionaires are hoarding 80% of California's water. Like, billionaires suck. They shouldn't own any water to begin with. But it's important that we recognize the impact that drought is having and we're not placing all of the blame where it doesn't belong because that's not productive in identifying the issues we're going to need to tackle if we ever make it through this administration. All right, on to the next story. All right, y'all, let's hop into this next story real quick, which are Trump's executive orders. Um, I'm not going to list all of the executive orders that Trump has put out there because that would take too long. According to an article by CNN that was last updated yesterday, that's like keeping track of every single one of Trump's XOs. Trump has managed to pass a total of 65 executive orders um, since he's taken office. Now, Trump did promise 100 executive orders on his first day, and that clearly didn't happen. Doesn't matter all that much. I'm just pointing out one of the many broken promises he's made. Uh, cool. So before we get into the story, let's talk about what an executive order is. An executive order is a is a an order that the president can give that mandates how the federal government should act. It has the same power as law, however, it is ultimately not law. Right. Trump can sign an executive order saying that if you're an illegal immigrant in this country, you have to be deported. Or trans people, the federal government should not recognize trans people. It has the power of law in the sense the feds have to follow it, but it is not a law in the sense that the that the like Congress passed it, that the legislative branch managed to pass these laws. So they suck, but ultimately it's just going to impact the federal level. So there's a level of protection there, not a big one, but there is a level. Um, the executive orders I want to talk about today are Trump's birthright citizenship executive order and his executive order on gender. To begin with, Trump's executive order on birthright citizenship. The this executive order is seeking to end birthright citizenship in this country, which, if you don't know, is expressly protected by the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment expressly says if you are born or naturalized, any person born or naturalized in the United States or in a jurisdiction thereof, then you are a citizen. Right, that's like section 1 of the 14th Amendment. That is what the 14th Amendment says. That is what the 14th Amendment does. Now, ultimately, Trump is trying to get this overturned by arguing that it's never been interpreted to extend to everybody born in this country. It was just meant to be interpreted as like people who were of African descent when slavery ended to protect the children of former slaves. Um, this is mind-bogglingly stupid because nowhere in Section 1, Section 2, Section 3, or Section 4 does it say this only applies to this group of people. Now, this was heard by a federal judge, and this judge said, no, you're wrong. The 14th Amendment applies to everybody. This is unconstitutional. This federal judge then said that anybody who passed the bar should know this is unconstitutional and is stunned that Trump's lawyers managed to pass the bar if they think it's constitutional. Um, I think this is like so. First of all, the federal judge is right. This is an unconstitutional exo. Trump cannot mandate the federal government not recognize the citizenship like this, because the 14th Amendment says they're citizens. At the end of the day, though, it doesn't really matter because if this case gets heard by the Supreme Court and they agree with Trump, then that is the justification and the grounds needed for Trump to then ignore the rest of the Constitution. I believe ultimately this executive order is a litmus test to determine how far he can go in destroying a country, in destroying our Constitution. Because if the Supreme Court agrees with him, that gives him justification to say, look, you set a precedent with with your decision on my executive order on birthright citizenship, so I can run for the third term. So I can have people, have soldiers quartered in times of peace. So I can have, you know, the press jailed for speaking negatively about me, right? That's what this is. This is, I believe, a racist action meant to litmus test to see how far he can go. And I think the Supreme Court is gonna agree with him because they've had like so long to be stacked Republican. And all things considered, it's a pretty fucking Republican Supreme Court. And they agree with him. I don't know if they're going to necessarily agree with Trump on this, but I also don't think it matters that much because Trump is a narcissist. So even if they disagree, what's going to stop him from doing it anyways? Like the checks and balances in this country only work if we all agree to participate. And I thoroughly believe that at least two branches of government are now no longer participating in checks and balances, those being the executive and legislative. And soon we'll see if the judicial is not participating. So if this gets heard by the Supreme Court, I recommend that y'all that be the time you leave the country, because I don't think it's worth it to stick around after that, because this marks the end of an era in American politics and marks the true beginning of a fascistic government. Because right now it's up in the air if Trump can be as fascist as he wants. If the Supreme Court agrees with him, then it's decided. The Constitution doesn't apply anymore. Donald Trump can do what he wants. All right. The next executive order I want to talk about is incredibly depressing, but it is the executive order mandating that the federal government stop using gender, stop using, as like stop using the word gender in any of its forms. We are only, talking about sexes. So, you know, theoretically male and female, because Trump doesn't understand how intersex people work, or that they even exist, and that and that the federal government only recognized documents with the one of the two sex markers on it. So no more X as a gender marker, uh, and no more switching your gender markers around on your documents. This is incredibly harmful to trans people, and it's just the next step in his hate campaign against us. It's a completely baseless campaign, but that's what fascism is. It only knows the language of violence, so it's going to enact itself in the language of violence. Um, if your passports or driver's licenses have an X on them or a gender marker, uh, that isn't what you were assigned with at birth, then this executive order also allows the federal government to deny whatever you're doing. It allows them to say you need to have this or this or this instead. It's just bad, and it makes it incredibly difficult for trans and gender fluid people to travel. Effectively, he's trying to keep us trapped here, um, so that he can continue to enact his violence upon us, which is it's what fascist governments do. I'm not going to dwell on that too long. What can you do if you are queer, gender diverse, or trans and have a different birth marker on your IDs? I honestly don't know. My best piece of advice is to start by getting your driver's license updated to have your uh, sex assigned at birth on it, if that has been changed. And then it's expensive, but you should also update your passport so that it matches as well. Because ultimately Trump wants to keep us trapped here, and if we can find if we are able to make it so that we can travel, it'll be easier to seek asylum in other countries. Um, there's no guarantee that they will approve you for new documents. There's no guarantee that you'll be able to get away with getting new stuff, but but it's still worth trying. And for as violent and harmful as it's going to be to go get this stuff updated to the sex assigned at birth, it is, at the end of the day, better to be alive and better to not be arrested by the cops. And it's better to be able to get out of the country if you need to than it is for you know, than it is to be dead. Than it is for you to be locked up because of the letter on your documents. It sucks, but I think we'll get through this. Just make sure you're ready to run and leave the country if you're able to. And a huge part of that is making sure your documents won't get you arrested at the border or by a police officer on your way there. All right, y'all. That's it for this story. It's depressing, but what part of this isn't? Let's move on to the next. All right, y'all, we got two more international stories. And thankfully both of these are going to be relatively quick. Um, the for this story is going to be about bird flu. Now, if you don't know, bird flu is a very dangerous flu that like humans have been really scared of for a long time because we don't have like a super great cure to it. The flu in general is an already very dangerous and scary disease, and bird flu is just a more dangerous variety of the flu. Um, Specifically, this story is centering around the H5N1 strain of the bird flu, which is the latest, most deadly, dangerous strain. It is more pathogenic. It's more spreadable. It's far more infectious than your garden variety bird flus, so it's not good. It's bad. Um, I am not quite as worried about this though, despite the danger, as uh, I think maybe a lot of other people are. And it's because um, the bird flu struggles deeply to transmit itself between humans or to between animals and humans, um, which already provides us a bit of protection. And if it does, then we already have a lot of ways to deal with it for if we get sick, right? If you wash your hands, then you're probably going to be fine. If you're like taking care of yourself, you'll probably be somewhat okay. Um, it's not something you want to get, and if you get it, it's gonna take you out for a while. But you're probably going to. It's easier to avoid getting bird flu um, than it is for many other diseases. So, in so long as you're practicing safe hygiene and you're, being smart about how you're interacting with people, you should be okay. Let's talk a little bit about how it uh, spreads, how we can get it, and what we can do to protect ourselves and our animals. I'm getting most all of this information from CDC websites, from CDC articles that I will, of course, have linked below. Um, but ultimately, bird flu is the it's okay. Sorry, I've been talking for basically an hour and a half straight. I'm a little tired, but bird flu transmits itself between humans and animals through the infected fluids um, of animals and through eating an infected animal. Um, so if you are in close proximity to birds, if you're in close proximity to sick animals, then you're more likely to get it because you're going to be interacting with their infected feces, their infected mucus, spit, all of that. So if you're not working with animals, you'll probably be okay. If you're working with animals, you need to make sure that you're taking the time to keep yourself healthy and to ensure that you're, wearing gloves, wearing masks, wearing eye protection, all that stuff, so that infected particulates can't get on you and it can't infect you. Um, if so yeah, that's how it spreads from animals to humans, through the infected material of animals. You can also get it by eating infected animal meat. So like if you eat a chicken that was infected with bird flu, then you'll likely get bird flu. Even that can be dealt with by just cooking your meats to their proper temperatures. So for chicken, that's like 165 degrees internal. So there's no pink left. I personally would probably bump that up to 170, 175. Chicken might be a little dry, but I'd rather have dry chicken that can be saved with a moist sauce than I would have bird flu. Um, Beef can also be infected. You want to make sure you're cooking that thoroughly as well. And I am unclear if pork can be infected. However, pork is another white meat, and so if you are eating it, you need to make sure that your pork is dealt with, right? It's cooked thoroughly as well. Pretty much any time you are given pretty much any time you're eating food, you want to eating meat that could be infected. You just want to make sure you're cooking it to the right internal temperature. I would also highly recommend immediately after dealing with any raw meats that you wash your hands thoroughly and you immediately wash the utensils that you use to cook that meat. You don't want to leave it sitting in the sink or on the counter where the bacteria can fester. Um, if you leave it on the bacteria or sink where bacteria or sorry, countertop or sink where bacteria can fester, that's just more contamination you're going to have to deal with later. So just immediately take care of all the bacteria that you can, and start cooking your meats to the correct, to the internal temperatures recommended by the CDC. So for bird, that's 165 internal. For beef, that I believe is 170 internal. I'm looking for the exact article right now. 160 internal for ground beef, and whole cuts should be at least 145 internal with a 3-minute rest period. Um, you should also not be drinking any raw, unpasteurized milk because that's where a lot of the bacterias are. Pasteurization helps deal with excess bacteria contamination in meats. Okay, that's how you can avoid getting bird flu. What happens, or can you tell if you get the bird flu, and what do you do about it if you are sick? Now, you're not going to want to hear this, but if you are sick, you're going to want to go to the hospital. It is infinitely better to have a high medical bill that you can just ignore than it is for you to than it is for you to die, right? Um, Now, if you like absolutely cannot miss work, I don't know what to say. You should not go out with the bird flu. I recognize a lot of people will. I recognize that there's very little you can do about it once you get sick. But you need to make sure that you're protecting the other people in your community by not going out and working if you are sick. You should go to the hospital and you should get treatment. The symptoms for bird flu. You can tell you have bird flu um, by the same way you can tell if you have, the regular flu. You're going to be getting a fever, you're going to have a cough, you're going to feel body aches, fatigue, a lot of really horrible, horrible symptoms, and you're going to feel like crap and you're going to feel like you want to die. Um, I had the flu once before. I had an influenza a couple years ago. It was the single worst experience of my life, and I highly, highly recommend that nobody ever has to experience what I experienced. Um, I highly hope nobody has to experience that. So if you do get the bird flu, take a step back and go to the hospital. Get the treatment you need. Alternatively, you're going to be bedridden, so make sure you've got plenty of fluids nearby. You're going to be dehydrated due to the fever. Um, Make sure that you've got easy to digest foods such as applesauce, such as yogurt, such as pudding nearby. Um, you're not going to be like eating steaks anytime soon. You're not going to be eating vegetables anytime soon. So just make sure that you're able to, from bed, eat safe, easy foods because you're not going to have the energy to get up and move all that much. Also, if you start getting sick, call someone to come help you and tell them to make sure that they're protected. Because at the end of the day, you're likely not going to be able to take care of yourself, right? You're not going to be able to get out of bed very easy. You're not going to be able to waddle your way to the kitchen with the amount of pain that you'll be in. So, to recap, mask up if you're around animals and if you're around people. It spreads through contaminated particulate matter, and it spreads through contaminated foods. Make sure you're cooking your foods thoroughly, and make sure you're washing your hands thoroughly and frequently. These are the best tips I have to avoiding the getting bird flu. If you do get bird flu, either go to the hospital and have them treat you and then ignore your medical debt, or have somebody come over and help you because you're not going to be able to take care of yourself. Trust me, influenza A is going to take you out. The influenza A took me out, and bird flu is just going to be worse. Final thing, if you have had COVID in the past, and at this point, many of us have had COVID, uh, your compromised immune system puts you at even more danger of bird flu. And so I highly, highly recommend going to a doctor if you are, if you think you're getting sick. Um, Even if you don't think you've had COVID, I recommend playing it safe and assuming you had COVID and were just asymptomatic rather than you've had COVID, rather than assuming you've just never had COVID, right? It's better to assume the worst and prepare for the worst and hope for the best than it is to act like we're in the best case scenario and have the worst happen to you. Okay, I'm not super worried about this, but I will keep y'all updated if bird flu continues to spread. Best of luck to all of you. Remember, wear your masks, stay safe, and wash your hands. Let's get to the next story. Alrighty, this is our final domestic story, and I'm going to try and make this short because I think this is actually just a lot of bluster and talk. Um, it's indicative of a lot, but I'm not convinced this is going to go anywhere meaningful in this direction. I'll get into what I mean in the analysis. But as I'm sure you all have heard, Trump wants to buy Greenland in Canada uh, for strategic national defense purposes. Um, the Specifically focusing on Greenland, Canada has outright said no, we're not becoming the 51st state. But there's now a lot of propaganda going around surrounding Greenland and what Greenland wants, as well as what Denmark has been saying. So Trump said, to recap, Trump said, we want Greenland for strategic national defense purposes. We need to have it. The U.S. needs to have it to like protect ourselves against moves that China and Russia are making in the Arctic. Denmark, who is like Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark. Denmark said, ew, no, you don't get Greenland. Back off. To which Greenland, or which Greenland said, yeah, we agree, we're not going with you. Now, Trump has come out and like started lying about the total number of people who want to be in Greenland. There were some stories going around that they like his team paid homeless people in food to wear MAGA hats and say, yeah, we want to be part of the US. I believe that happened, but that's not the focus of this story. What is the focus of this story is that once Trump got into office, um, he had a call with the Danish Prime Minister, and I'm getting this information from an article written for The Hill by Laura Kelly on 1/24/25, um, where Trump said, we are going to be taking Greenland and we are willing to use military and economic force if needed. Um, but before it got to that point, the Danish prime minister is saying, we'll work with you, we'll work with you militaristically, we'll shoulder more of the burden of, the defense costs for the region. And Trump said, no, we want Greenland. And that we will use military force if need be. This has, understandably, put Denmark and the EU on the back pedal. They're now in a code red sort of situation where it's like the world's largest military just said they want our country. We're going to have to stand up. We're preparing for war against the US, basically. This is understandably really bad. And Europe and the EU are taking the right steps here. They are saying, yes, we need to protect Greenland. We need to protect the countries that we are, that are within our purview and our protection. And we're going to do that against the US. So I think this is a big deal for Europe, but I think for us in America, as American citizens, this is another tactic to try and wear us out. And so when you hear that Trump is starting to try and take over Greenland and trying to take over Europe, uh, you you should take it on face value. You should say this sucks, but I need to focus on making sure that as of right now, I'm going to be able to feed myself. I need to make sure that my community is protected against the, ice raids. I need to make sure that we are protecting the most vulnerable people in our community. Because ultimately, what Trump is trying to do is trying to divide our ability to protect our own by using threats of war with Europe to get us to like distract us, right? It's easier to ignore the fact that we're deporting hundreds of thousands of migrants when we are worried about going to war with some of our greatest allies. It's easier to say I need to make sure that I'm able to eat. And so nothing else matters when Trump is saying we'll use military force to take over Greenland. Um, Ultimately, I want us to recognize that this is a fucked up situation. If we're a US citizen, I need us to recognize that yes, the Trump administration should not be making moves on Greenland. But there's not a lot we can do about it right now. We need to focus on building strong communities and focusing on making sure we have the mental fortitude to survive the domestic onslaughts before we are able to help make sure that wars don't happen. Because Trump is not going to listen to us. This is not something we can protest our way out of, y'all. We can't show up to the White House with picket signs and form a line that says, we will not support the war with Greenland and Denmark, right? That's not going to work. Trump doesn't care, right? The, the neoliberal institutions in our country haven't cared about our peaceful protests for a long time, and they give us only pitiful, meaningless action um, to get uh, to like placate us, and that's not going to work this time because Trump doesn't care. We need to focus on building up our communities, building up our community resilience, and making sure that that we are protecting the most vulnerable people from this from this Trump administration before we focus on what Trump is doing to our European neighbors. And we should still call him out on this. I'm still going to keep us updated on this Greenland story. And if we go to war with Europe, I'll do my best to make sure we know about that. But ultimately, I don't want us to take this story as the thing we take action on. I'd rather y'all, from everything we've just talked about, I'd rather y'all take the time to start community building. Get to know your neighbors. Get to know the people that surround you every day. And then build up a strong, resilient community, right? Start a community garden. Get to work with food programs in the community. Get to work in um, the areas of like improving education because the DOE funding is about to be slashed if it hasn't been already. Um, there's a lot we can do, and I want us to focus on making sure that the Trump administration is not able to split our communities further. There will come a time where we can act on these international issues. There will come a time when we as US citizens are able to fight back against the Trump administration's and future administrations' decisions to go to war with our closest allies and partners. Um, Today is not that day, right? I trust Europe to be able to defend itself. Truth be told, even though we have the world's strongest military, I don't think the United States can actually do all that much in a war. Europe is going to have to be prepared for another war on both fronts, one from the US, one from um, Russia. And I just think we need to take the time to make sure that our communities are built up. And once we survive this initial onslaught, then we can start making moves to oppose these dumb ass, narcissistic, isolationist wars that Trump is beginning to wage. Okay, that's what I think we should do about this Greenland situation is that we need to focus on ourselves and our communities first, and we need to trust Europe and the rest of the world to recognize how to fight these wars. And I think that is something they can do. Um, as for right now, what does this mean geopolitically? Because there is some analysis to be had here. Uh, I think geopolitically, all this really means is that the Trump, sorry, that the that America's allies are done, right? Like if we go to war with Greenland, the EU is casting us aside. We're over. There is no more uh free world with America in it. Um, I thoroughly believe that the European Union is going to, every country is going to drastically reduce their alliance with the US. They're going to start relying on themselves more. The US will likely line itself closer with Russia. And for as much talk as Trump has about hating China, I wouldn't be shocked to see a Chinese US alliance blossom, specifically militaristically. Because Trump is signaling that he is no longer interested in helping Europe or being partners with Europe, and Europe is receiving that message loud and clear. And so they're going to focus on making sure that the European community is tight knit enough to survive the onslaughts, right? Um, and so I think if we survive the Trump administration, the EU is going to be incredibly wary and hesitant on getting the on ever partnering with us again on anything, right? So, at the end of the day, I think this signals the end of the current world order as we know it, and we're going to have to work around the fact that Trump is that like the neoliberal world order won't include America as a major player anymore, and that I think we will see America and Russia's alliance grow incredibly strong over the next couple of years because Putin has Trump in his pocket and is letting Trump think that he's in control. Uh, so yeah, I don't think Europe is going to cast us aside if we're able to get Trump out of the White House soon, but I do think that um, Trump is going to, or that Europe is going to keep America at a pretty far arm's length for many, many, many years to come. I mean, if we can't get Trump out of the White House in this next election, or something else has happened, uh, we get someone worse than Trump, then Europe is going to cut ties with us, and I think this is the start of that. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see play out, but I really don't see a world in which Europe allows an alliance with the US to continue after this, especially if we actually do go to war with them. So, to summarize, this sucks. We shouldn't be going to war with Denmark. We shouldn't be going to war with our allies. But at the end of the day, we as American citizens need to take the time to to make sure that we aren't fractured anymore and to make sure our communities are resilient enough to make it through this initial onslaught so that we can slow the fascistic rise of power and eventually begin to turn it around. So, yeah. that's what I got for this story. We are now moving into the international stories, and I hope some of these will be a little bit better, but I guess we'll find out. Okay, y'all, we are jumping into the international stories. I'm going to try to keep these shorter just because there's still like a lot of editing to do, and I'm quite busy today, but I will give them all the time and the respect that they deserve. Um, if I don't go nearly as in depth in any of these stories as you want me to, let me know. I will recover them in a future video. All right, let's start off with the story of DeepSeek, China's AI answer to ChatGPT. Um, Without getting too much into what LLMs are, large language models, uh, what you need to know is that ChatGPT and DeepSeek are both LLMs. They're both large language models. And effectively, what that means is that both of them have been given um, a whole bunch of statistical data about how language works. Uh, for ChatGPT, that's English. DeepSeek, that is, well, now English and Chinese. Uh, and so they're given a bunch of this data, a bunch of like statistical data about what words come after other words. So, for example, if like the boy ran is a super common sentence in English, ChatGPT will statistically put the word boy after the word the more frequently. Because effectively, what LLMs are trying to do is they're trying to guess what the next word in a sentence is. It's very complicated, and it's far more complicated than what I've just explained. But I'm linking here an article written by Caitlin Campbell on August 14th, 2024. A um, I'm linking this article about how LLMs work and what they do, and I think it does an excellent job at explaining how generative AI functions. Um, at the very least, the chatbot generative AI, such as DeepSeek and ChatGPT. An analogy used in this article I particularly like is that you should think of these uh, technologies as the autofill feature for whenever you're texting or emailing someone. You know how your phone will give you like a set of suggested words that it thinks will come next, so that you can save time typing by just tapping on those words. ChatGPT and DeepSeek and other LLMs are like that, except on a much larger scale, right? Instead of trying to guess one or two words, it's trying to guess an entire conversation. um, so if you're incredibly lay and you have like no idea what LLMs are or how ChatGPT works, I highly recommend this article. I think it's a good starting point for y'all's research. Anyways, delving into DeepSeek, DeepSeek is the um, Chinese answer to ChatGPT. It is effectively the same thing with a few key differences. I'm getting this information from an article on Reuters published by Sinead Karu, Amanda Cooper, and Ankur Banerjee. I apologize for how I butchered those names. Um, Published January 27th, 2025. Uh, DeepSeek is an LLM that is drastically cheaper than ChatGPT is to develop. Reportedly, ChatGPT had a couple uh, $1 billion put into it to get to where it's at today. Trump recently approved, I think, 5.5 billion into AI research or something like that. And DeepSeek only cost about sorry, about 600 million. Um, maybe more. I strongly suspect it is more, but regardless, it is definitely cheaper than $5.5 billion. Uh, DeepSeek is also drastically more efficient and effective than ChatGPT is. So it uses less resources when you ask it a question. Um, it results in answers faster than ChatGPT by so you're not spending nearly as much time on it thinking, quote unquote, and it uses less resources in those responses, which means it's more efficient on lower end chips, meaning it's generally more accessible. So all in all, like DeepSeek is the superior LLM. Um, as a result of DeepSeek's release, this caused US tech companies, uh, specifically like, NVIDIA, Google, Microsoft, all of these huge tech companies that are heavily investing in AI research, uh, to it caused their stocks to plummet. All in all, the United States stock market lost about $1 trillion in value. I'm going to say that again because that's a number we haven't heard before. We lost $1 trillion in value. We don't have trillionaires on Earth yet. No one person's net worth is equal to how much value the US stock market just crashed. Um, I I suspect that the pop of this AI bubble is going to negatively affect people because the stock market seems to always punish the poor for rich decisions. Um, However, I don't think it's going to be like as bad as the housing market crash of 2008. Um, and I suspect that we will be able to recover far more efficiently this time around, simply because most people don't have their entire lives built upon AI stocks. The people who lost stocks lost a bunch of money, right? When the stocks plummeted, they lost a bunch of money, but they are not at a point where it's like impossible to recover. Um, Along with this, so I don't think this like stock market crash is going to be quite as bad. I do think this represents a popping of the AI bubble that we've been seeing growing over the past few years, which I think is good, because it means that companies are going to be less interested in American AI, meaning that you should see a decrease in the ways in which innovation are being shoved down our throats and used in everything, because it's not as impressive to venture capitalists and investors if an American company asks for $1 billion to, develop an AI when China can do it for less. Um, I'm still not happy that DeepSeek released because I'm fundamentally anti-generative AI. I do not think this technology is good for us. I do not think it's good for the planet. But whether I like it or not doesn't matter. It's here, it's the way of the future. So at the very least, American tech companies got knocked down a couple pegs. All right, that's it for this story. Let's hop into the next one. Alrighty, so this next story is about the Gaza ceasefire. Um, I don't know if y'all heard, but I think about 2 weeks ago, Gaza and Palestine came to a ceasefire agreement. They said yes, let's have a ceasefire. Gaza then almost immediately went back on that and kept bombing, but it seems like they have since then stopped. Um, which is a good thing. The genocide Israel was implementing on Palestine and they were executing on the Palestinian people is despicable and it is wrong. So the fact that this is at least a temporary pause on the violence, the needless, senseless violence, is good. Um, I do want to point out though that this is a ceasefire, not a truce. I'll get more into what that means and what I think this means for the conflict here in just a minute. But what you need to know is that there is a chance the war can resume. Right? We are not done fighting just because there's a ceasefire. There's still work to do. Um, I'm going to give you the exact same advice I gave in the Greenland story. Take it for what it is. Condemn the actions, do what you can, but ultimately, we need to make sure our communities are safe and protected because if it's kind of like we can't help anybody if we are dead and dying, right? Like, yes, I want this to stop and I wish I could do more. But at the end of the day, I can't do anything if Trump is actively shredding my community and I lose, we lose support structures around us. Um, but anyways, back to the story. So according to an article written for The Guardian, uh, by Emma Graham Harrison on Monday, January 27th, 2025, um, Israel began opening the checkpoints between where like the people the refugees were at and where the Israel had been flattening and just absolutely bombing these areas. And as a result, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are returning to northern Gaza. They are returning to uh their the land they once called home. I they are not, I should be clear, they're not returning to simply rubble, where there's still some infrastructure and there is still like a semblance of a city. They are going to be returning to an area that is so destroyed and flattened with bombs and senseless violence, it will be unrecognizable. But it's good that they're able to return to begin with. So, um, I suspect that this ceasefire will not hold indefinitely, but it will hold long enough for people to go in, see the damage, and begin rebuilding efforts. Um, I hope I'm wrong. I hope this ceasefire means the end to this conflict, or as much as an end as there can be. Um, the this conflict is old. It is a couple centuries old, and I won't thoroughly get into it here, but from my understanding, which could be incomplete, this conflict started back during like the Crusades over the Holy Land, right? Um, and Israel, now in the modern day, Israel is attempting to reclaim many important holy sites along the Gaza Strip. And to do that, they have to they have to force Palestinians out of out of their homes so that they can get back to their these holy sites. Israel also, I believe, wants land. This is not just a holy war. Israel is actively seeking to expand its territory, and it wants to expand outwards to Palestine. Um, Likely because Palestine and the Gaza Strip border water, which Israel currently doesn't have super easy access to. Meaning, if they're able to take this land, they get more water trade, which is excellent for any economy. Um, so yeah, that's the like super low level explanation of what this war is. If y'all want a deeper explanation, I will happily make a video on that. It is probably going to be at least an hour long at minimum, if not an hour and a half. So that's why I'm not going into too much more depth here. But anyways, this is a good story. And I genuinely do hope that this marks the end of this current conflict. The checkpoints being open and Palestinians being able to return to their land in their homes means that they're going to be able to begin rebuilding efforts. It means that they're going to be able to start the process of figuring out how much um they need to do, which is a good thing. They are hopefully coming to the end of a horribly violent, horribly brutal conflict. And I can only wish them the safest of travels back home and an ease of rebuilding, which I know will not happen. While I personally don't think this is going to hold, and I think Israel is going back on its ceasefire, I hope I'm wrong. But don't be surprised if we hear more stories about the ceasefire breaking soon. Don't be surprised if we hear more stories of horrors being committed in this area and the genocide continuing. All right, that's what I got for this story. Let's move on to the next. Alrighty, this next story is going to be a bit of a doozy. It's because we are centering on Elon Musk. Um, so if y'all don't know, at Trump's inauguration, Elon Musk threw up a Nazi salute, and I feel comfortable and confident in calling it that. Um, a lot of people have been saying it's a Roman salute. However, the closest we can ever get to seeing a Roman use this, the only evidence we have is one painting that was painted in, I want to say, like 1749 in Italy. Um, that's the closest we can get to the Romans ever using this salute. We have no history that actual Romans utilized a salute that looked anything like what Musk did. So I'm very confident in saying that this was a Nazi salute. This was and this was an active call to the, you know, to what it means. It was an active call to the uh, show support of what the Nazis did, which is despicable and disgusting. Um, Musk continues this trend of making incredibly questionable decisions that the right will defend with their lives for some ungodly reason by appearing virtually at the Germans' AFD campaign conference and meeting. If y'all don't know what the AFD is, the AFD is the Alternative für Deutschland party of Germany. These are a group of alt-right uh, people in Germany who routinely make calls for a return to a better Germany, who routinely make calls to be, you know, to go back in time to a time when they thought Germany was at its peak. And you're never going to guess when they think this was. It was the 1930s and 40s. It was when the Nazis were in power. The AFD, I thoroughly believe, are Nazis without calling themselves Nazis. Because of course it's illegal to say I'm a Nazi in Germany right now. Um, so, according in an article written by Emma Victoria Farr for Reuters on January 25th, 2025, um, elongated muskrat goes to he appears virtually at this AFD election campaign event, um, and spoke in very open and public support of the party. He had some real stellar quotes such as it's good to be proud of German culture, German values, and to not lose that in some sort of multiculturalism that dilutes everything. He also said there is too much focus on past guilt and we need to move beyond that. And finally, the kicker, the quote that really like gets my blood boiling um is that sorry, let me find it. It got lost in the sauce. Okay, sorry, I found it. I'm getting this quote from an article written by NPR or written for NPR by Rachel Treisman on January 27th, 2025. And this quote reads, "It's good to be proud of This quote reads, children should not be guilty of the sins of their parents, uh, let alone their great grandparents." Um, I think it's very clear here that Trump is saying it's okay to be a Nazi. It's good to be proud of what you want. It's good to be proud of the pro-German, you know, values that Hitler had. And I thoroughly believe that this is just what he is, getting at. It makes no sense to me for him to make the salute um, at Trump's inauguration, then to go to the alt-right party in Germany who routinely says that they want to return to a time where Germany was for Germans, and then say that like y'all shouldn't be guilty of the sins of your past and it's good to be proud of German culture. Like that pattern to me says that Elon Musk is a Nazi and that he is encouraging Nazi parties around the world. He's trying to embolden them. He's encouraging them. I know people are going to continue to defend Musk, and at the end of the day, there's only so much we can do to try and convince these people that he is a Nazi. And many of them defending him are Nazis themselves. And so, if you hear anybody talking about this story and they're defending Musk's actions and they're saying, "Oh, well, he's just saying it's good to be proud of where you come from. It's good to be proud of your culture." He's not saying that like they need to go back to that time. I encourage you all to remember that he's speaking to a group who actively calls for a return to 1930s Germany. He's speaking to the alt-right fascists of Germany. And he's emboldening alt-right fascists in the US, he's emboldening them around the world. This is a pattern of behavior that I believe is signaling the rise of fascism in the States again, and around the world again. So I'm going to urge you all to keep your eyes on Musk and what he's doing. And if you hear or see people speaking this way in your community, I'm going to give you some strange advice, and it's to be kind to them. Because at the end of the day, I believe that alt-right beliefs and that alt-right mindsets arise out of a sense of isolation and loneliness. They're derived from emotions of, intense emotions of anger and despair. uh, Hitler played on Germans' fears after World War I and their anger, because a lot of Germans felt wrongfully accused of starting World War I. And so when World War II came around, um, and Hitler said, "Yeah, we can do this. Don't you even worry about it. We'll like make Germany great again." Everybody was on board with that because they were he was playing on their sense of deep-seated fear, hatred, loneliness, and confusion that the First World War left them. And so when he stood up, and so when these people say the things they're saying, to me that is indicative of the fact that society writ large failed them. And I believe that they can be de-radicalized if we take the time to show them the compassion that they were told they would never be shown, if we take the time to show them that there is still that they can find happiness and kindness with other communities. Now, I'm not saying you have to like hear somebody say uh incredibly horrid racist shit and not be angry about it. I'm also not saying you can't call them on it. You should still absolutely be calling people whenever they do fucked up, horrible things. Do not let them get away with that. Do not let them feel like they can just do that. That's not okay. We aren't doing that here. But also understand where they are coming from and understand that the only way to de-radicalize them is to take the time to show them that they are somewhat cared for and appreciated, and that there is community outside of the vitriol and hatred that they're in. Don't subject yourself to needless violence. Don't subject yourself to needless cruelty. If they are actively being violent towards you, absolutely leave. If they are not going to listen to you and they're just going to call you slurs or start physically attacking you, do what you need to do to get yourself to safety. If you have the opportunity, take 5 minutes to talk to one of them and just be nice, right? Like the only way that hatred ever has been defeated, one of the only ways, is by allowing the people feeling that anger and that hatred to know that there are alternatives out there. And right now you know, the social media landscape is doing a really good job at keeping a lot of people really trapped in a cycle of anger and despair. It's not productive for us to just scream at each other. And if we want to see real meaningful progress away from fascism in the long term, we do need to be giving We do need to have strategies to community build with these people that we don't like. We need to have strategies on how to de-radicalize them. And step one, I believe, is like talking to them and just like letting them know that you're a human being too, and stuff like that, right? Okay. So I that's all I got for this story. Elon Musk is a Nazi. If you get the chance, punch him in the face. And most fascists, I do think, especially working class ones, can be de-radicalized with effort. And I don't think we're to the point where that effort is not worth it yet. At the end of the day, we're going to have to learn to live with these people, because I don't really feel like genociding people based on their political ideology. If y'all have other ideas, throw them in the comments. If you disagree with me on that take, let me know in the comments section down below. Um, okay. Yeah, that's what I got for this story. Let's move on to the next. Okay, second to last story, and it is about intellectual property rights in Brazil. I picked this story for a number of reasons. The first one being that's not horridly depressing, and the other that it's super interesting. Um, so Brazil has been tackling the challenge of what IPR, intellectual property rights, uh, for generative AI content looks like. Because right now, especially in Brazil, the consensus for what constitutes a work that can gain legal protection is that there is an element of human authorship and creativity to it. And I'm getting this information from an article written by Diário de Pernambuco. Pernambuco. Again, I deeply apologize for how I pronounced that name. I promise y'all I'm going to be working on my Portuguese and Spanish going forward. Um, this one was first published in uh, August 8th of 2024, so it is a little bit older, but it's important for us to understand the context behind the story, and this article does a great job of that. Um, so in Brazil, back in 2024, the 44th International Congress of the Brazilian Association of Intellectual Property, or the ABPI for short, um, met and began discussing topics such as AI and its relationship to IP. Um, the goal of this meeting was to figure out if generative AI works are deserving of intellectual property rights, how they should go about addressing those concerns, and what it means for stolen works to be used in IP and how to like get reparations to the people who had their work stolen. This was not a conference to just like say we should outright ban AI or AI should have no protections or anything like that. They recognized that AI is a part of the future and that they have to do something about it. Um, the meeting, I, I'll let y'all like actually go find and read the meeting notes, but it's a very this article I think does a very good job of summarizing it. In that the meeting was incredibly productive. However, at the time it yielded very little in terms of actionable ideas or plans. That does seem to have changed very semi recently, give or take. Um, because the I'm getting this information from an article by the CISAC. Because in December of 2024, a law that aims to address artificial intelligence that, like, to the best of my understanding, these articles are I'm having to piece this story together in from languages I don't speak with my translate function that's built into my browser. So I apologize if I'm a little off on some of these. But As far as I can tell, that meeting from the ABPI helped inspire the writing of this bill as a first step action. And it passed the Senate on December 11th of 2024. Uh, this bill is designed to do four key things, which I will list here in just a second. But the point is that's a major win for addressing how we should be, dealing with AI. It is a signal that AI is here to stay. We're not just getting rid of it. And so we have to figure out how we're going to handle it. And Brazil is taking the lead on this with some very interesting ideas and things that I think we can learn from. So the four key things that this bill attempted to get, or is attempting to do is first, AI software developers must disclose which copyright protected materials were used to train their systems. Second, a regulatory body for AI will be established in Brazil, featuring an experimental platform where developers can negotiate payments with creators whose works were used in the training of their modules. Third, creators will have the right to prohibit their works from being used for AI training. Alternatively, they may authorize the usage with direct contracts with the AI companies or like collective management organizations. And finally, remunerations for creators will consider the size of the AI company, the frequency of use of the protected materials, and the potential competition these AI generated outputs might pose to human creators. So, that was a whole lot of jargon. Let's break it down point by point. First, uh, AI does have to tell people like the training sets. They can no longer just say, "Oh, it's a black box. We don't know." No, they have to start disclosing if copyrighted material is used. Second, a body will be created in Brazil to help negotiate payments between artists and AI companies for payments that the artists rightfully deserve for having their work used in the training data. Next, it gives the creators the right to say my work can't be used in training data, or they can negotiate direct contracts with these AI companies so that the people can't just take it, right? And fourth, uh, any payouts to creators will have to consider the size of the company, the frequency of use of the materials, and the potential competition for these AI generated outputs, which all of that will be taken into account when calculating how much money creators will be paid, right? So I think this is a solid first step. I do think this could do a whole lot more. Um, it's incredibly unclear if the default is that AI companies can't use these copyrighted works, or if the default is that AI companies can and creators have to opt out. I think that making it default AI companies can't use Brazilian works unless Brazilian creators opt in is a good first step, and that should be what we're doing. But you know what? We'll take what we can get. I think this is something that's worthwhile to think about going forward because America is going to have to address AI sooner or later. And honestly, I kind of think that this is a good model for how we should do things. It's going to look a little bit different, but I think this is the right first step to figuring out how we can protect creators, their intellectual property, while also not stifling, this innovation. For as much as I hate generative AI, I recognize it's here. I recognize a lot of people are excited about it and love it. And so we can't just get rid of it. Also, at this point, it's way too pervasive to like just wholesale get rid of. So we're going to have to address it legislatively, and I think the Brazilian model is going to be a great template for us to go off of. All right, that's what I got. Um, Hopefully this bill passes the upper house. Hopefully this bill gets signed into law. We will have to see. All right, I'll see y'all in the final story. Alrighty. So I have here the final story for tonight, which is that there are anti-Trump protests and anti-alt-right protests happening around the globe. If you are an American, you probably haven't heard of this. And if you have, it might have just been in passing on TikTok. That's where I first heard this, and I'm very thankful I started doing a little bit more research into this because the story fills me with a lot of hope. Um, to begin, we're going to take a look at an article written for the NBC News that was published July 11th, 2017. Now, that is an old article. It is at the start of Trump's first presidency. Um, it's into his first presidency. He wasn't a start. But regardless, first term. And it's about how French protesters planned no Trump zones during the Bastille Day trip. Now, if you don't know what Bastille Day is, it's a day meant to celebrate the relationship between France and the United States. Um, the U.S. and France have basically been buddies since day one. You know, they helped us with our revolution. We inspired theirs and then proceeded to refuse to help them with theirs. Um, they did quite, and then since then we've just been like really good friends. And so the Bastille Day is meant to be a celebration of that relationship, of the fact that the United States and France have been friends for so long and that we are great allies. And so the fact that in the first term, before Trump started doing all the unconstitutional fascist shit we talked about in the first half of the video, French people are already like, nah, we don't want you here. That's good news. And that attitude of people being like, nah, we don't want you here, is continuing today in places like London, Mexico City, Panama, um, and uh, Brussels in Belgium. Um, all of this is a very it just fills me with hope because because people are recognizing the danger that the alt right poses. They recognize how bad fascism is, and now they're seeing it play out in real time in America. Um, the international stage, it might feel like they don't care about American politics. It might feel like they don't care who we elect because we haven't heard anything about it. So it's like, oh, they paid attention to the election to see what like relations would be like for the next 4 years, and then they dipped. No, people do care, and people are standing with us in the fight against fascism. They're standing with us in the fight against Trump. This is not the end of the fight for liberation, I think. I don't think Trump is able to stamp out his pressers because they're literally, or his opposition because they're literally all over the world, which is a good thing. Because while we struggle to maintain a semblance of a normal life here in the States, people around the globe are pressuring their governments to do stuff. They are in support of their governments fighting back against Trump's tariffs and many of his plans, which is good. Sorry, I sound like a broken record right now. I should have scripted this part out, and I didn't. To wrap things up, because I don't want to keep you here any longer than I already have, just know that the world is standing with us and standing against Trump. And even if they have to go to war with the United States, I don't think that's a war against I think it's a war against fascism and what Trump represents. I strongly believe that despite Musk's attempts to elevate the alt-right parties of the world, there is now more than enough support to stop that from happening. And I personally am going to trust the uh, siblings we have around the globe to make sure that it doesn't happen in their country. And when things get dicey here and Trump starts bringing the fight elsewhere, I trust them to be able to stand against this bully and stand up against a narcissistic prick. And it fills me with hope that the world isn't going to fall so easily. And it fills me with hope that people are against Trump. I highly recommend checking out the Guardian article I have linked on this subject. There are some very striking images in there. It is now time for us to do our part, right? We can't let the rest of the world do this alone. So if you're, you know, given the people who will likely be watching this video, it's time to start like putting in a little bit of work so that we can overcome what Trump represents in the next 4 years. So community build, get to know people, start a community garden, start a way for people to get food a little bit easier, right? Even if you end up helping the very people who voted Trump in, at the end of the day, we are all working class. And there is time for anger, and there's time for hatred and vitriol, and we do not have to like these people that we're working with. But we can't do it alone. And much to our dismay, a lot of these people are our neighbors, and so they're the people we're going to have to eventually learn how to talk to if we want this to be over as soon as possible. All right. Well, that's all I've got for this weekly news roundup. Hopefully, I'll have another one on Monday, although this is a very intensive project that I decided to undertake. So, I am going to wish everybody here the absolute best of luck in everything y'all do. Remember to stay hopeful and remember to take time away from the news because exhausting yourself now is not a smart or efficient use of your time. Go talk to your neighbors, go talk to loved ones, bake someone some cookies if you can afford the eggs, right? Show kindness to people because that's how we start the community building process, and that is how we ultimately stand up to terrorists and fascists. All right, much love to y'all, and I will see you next week with another WNR. Bye.